possibility maximized. Presumed you listened as well.
100%.
Yeah.
I mean, I would ask him questions and he would say to me, well, here's why this will look this way, or here's why, I don't know. And sometimes he'd say, oh, no, I'm not sure about that. I don't think. And sometimes he'd go, that's a good point.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
So you were asking, so that's an interesting point as well. Like, something to know tactically for everybody who's watching and listening is that if you want to offer your opinion, so to speak, it's generally much more sophisticated to do that with a question. Accusation is the worst question, right? Suggestion is the next worst. Question is the best suggestion, And then you leave it open. It's like, well, what do you think? But it has to be honest. What do you think about doing it this way? And that can't be manipulative. It has to be, you have an idea. Could it happen like this? But if you're working with someone who knows something, you actually want to know what they think of that idea.
And that's when I talk about this with leaders, for instance, and I talk about asking questions, I literally say you have to ask earnest questions.
Yeah.
It has to be an earnest questions. I can't ask you a leading question. Wait,
right.
Don't you think it would look better? Or do you think it might be better if we do it like this?
Yeah.
When I already think I know the answer?
Yes, exactly.
I have to truly be curious and ask you the earnest questions.
Yes.
Hey, do you think it would look better from this angle over here? Or do you think that this is the best angle?
Right. So that's an attitude that's characterized by the opposite of pride.
Yes.
Like that's the humility that opens doors. So one of the things I figured out this year, because I was thinking about what I was doing on stage when I was lecturing and trying to determine explicitly why it was working. And I stumbled across something that in retrospect was pretty obvious. But I pose myself a central question before I go on stage, right? And it has to be an actual question. I actually have to not know the answer or not enough, and I have to want to know the answer, because otherwise the whole thing is a lie, right? But then I also understood, I can't believe it took me this long to figure this out, that the root word of question is quest, and that what I was doing on stage, because I lecture without notes, and I'm trying to investigate this question, was taking the listeners on an adventure. And the adventure was, the treasure at the end of the adventure was the resolution of that question, or at least its clarification or further movement towards answering it at minimum, right? And you want a landing too, where an answer emerges as a consequence of the dialogue. But it's definitely a quest. And that means that if you're collaborating with someone and you ask them honest questions, which you can do if you continually consult your ignorance, right? Then you're inviting them on a adventurous collaboration. And that is immediately playful rather than tyrannical.
Yeah.
I
really like the idea of consulting my ignorance. I definitely like.
Well, it's inexhaustible.
What am I missing here? What am I not doing? And this is something that when people come to me and whether it's a family member or someone I work with, and they don't agree with something I say, my thought isn't, what don't they understand?
Yeah.
My thought is, what don't I understand?
Yeah, right. What did I not clarify? Right. Well, you also don't know when someone objects. First of all, you don't know if they understood what you said. You also don't know if you said it that clearly. And so definitely in a situation like that, your best initial foray is questions. Mm-hmm. And then it's always possible, this is a useful thing to know too, I think this is part of the reason why you're supposed to love your enemies. Part of the reason is it'd be better if they were your allies. And so maybe you could figure out how to make that happen, and that would be better for everyone. But part of it also is they might be bringing you some information, right? And even if they're dead set against you for arbitrary reasons, it's possible that in their objections, they'll shed light on something that you could have done more effectively. Mm-hmm. And if you can really listen to them, they might tell you that, and that would be a good deal. Yep. So you used a question approach, right? And you said it had to be earnest. How did you figure out that it had to be earnest?
I think just from my time in the military and interacting with leaders up, down, and across the chain of command, and recognizing, what would you say, accusations are the worst
form of question.
Yeah, well, the worst way to kick things off.
You're doing this.
Yeah.
It's like, wait a sec. This, are you doing this? That's better. Yeah. That's easier. Same information conveyed, a little bit less, much less likely to put the person on the defensive.
Yeah. All you have to do is, when you're a young 20-year-old SEAL, all you have to do is instigate the ego of one senior commander one time, and you go, that didn't seem to work real well.
No, especially the first time they meet you. Yeah, that's a really bad idea.
And then soon you figure out that it's not just the senior commanders, it's the junior commanders, and then you realize it's your peers.
Yeah.
And the most important,
and you even.
The most important eureka moment is when you realize that it's the same with your subordinates. That your subordinate doesn't want to get told what to do.
No.
They want to get asked their opinion, and they want to, and you have to listen to it earnestly and say, maybe that does make more sense.
Yeah. They want to get invited along on an adventure.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's the best thing to set up if you can manage that.
Yes.
And you can, if the people that you're dealing with are dealing in good faith, you can manage that. But if the people that you're dealing with are not dealing in good faith, that's still often the best approach. Yep. I mean, you have to figure out if, you can rely on them, if that's a partnership that can even work. That's why you shouldn't really sell either. Because really what you're doing is you're offering people an opportunity that's a partnership. And if they're not interested, you don't want them as a customer because they're not going to be satisfied anyways. No. And the last thing you need is a dissatisfied customer. And you can think, oh, they gave me money. It's like, yeah, once. And so that's not that helpful. And who knows how much trouble they're going to cause if they're disgruntled? Yeah. Plenty, right? So don't push. Look, but don't push.
Yeah, I was listening to something you were doing the other day, and you were just talking about as a leader, an invitation as opposed to an order.
Yeah.
And I think you used something even more extreme than an order, mandates, these types of things.
Exactly. Use of fear and compulsion. Right. That's all sign of bad policy. Fear, compulsion, mandates, orders, all of that. Yep. And it's much more effective to proffer an invitation. And that could be a rough invitation. That's going to happen in the military for sure. It's not like the stakes aren't high, but
it still is, and this is one of the obstacles I had to overcome when we started doing leadership consulting with civilian companies, because people have the stereotypical view that in the military, you bark orders at someone, and then people are they're going to obey.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. No. Well, you can see that there are, and maybe this is a boot camp issue, and there's a boot camp issue with every disciplinary structure. There might be a window of disciplinary necessity where the person involved has to subordinate themselves to somewhat arbitrary demands. That would be the case when they don't know what the hell they're doing and they really need to listen. But the goal would be to build them as rapidly as possible into people who would engage in collaborative problem solving. And certainly in the military, the more that capacity is distributed down the ranks, the more effective the military is going to be, because that means that competent people can make local decisions in the environment as it changes without relying on or defaulting to a slow-moving chain of command that has shaky allegiance to begin with.
This is called decentralized command, and you just explained it perfectly. That's exactly what you want.
But what you want in your business too. You want to hire super competent people